Further opening statements? Mr. Matheson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief, but a couple of comments I'd just like to address on the low-level radioactive waste bill. Our hearings before this committee and actions in our federal court system have established that there is uncertainty associated with our current national policy on low-level radioactive waste. That's why Congress needs to act on this. I think this bill is the appropriate way to act, but I don't think anyone could argue that there's uncertainty about where federal policy is right now. Secondly, to the extent people think this is going to limit the expansion of nuclear power, I take issue with that. In fact, to the extent we have one location in this country for 37 different states that take 99% of our low-level radioactive waste, seems to me in a future that will be carbon constrained and likely have greater amount of nuclear power produced in this country, it makes sense to preserve this capacity for domestic waste. Now let's talk about the capacity issue. We heard from the other side that there is no capacity issue. That is really not what came out of the hearings that we held before this committee. In fact, when the GAO made its study, which by the way was based on 1 year's waste, and they just projected that 1 year's waste total out over the future, which any first-year MBA student will tell you is not the way you make projections, and it happened to be a low year that they used as their baseline year. Even then, they said 20 years, 30 years. That was kind of the boundary. Well, I don't see a whole bunch of states rushing forward to build new nuclear waste storage facilities in their state around this country right now. And so 20 years or 30 years, take your pick, that's not a long amount of time when we talk about looking at this issue. In fact, it's a rather short amount of time. So let's be careful about making blanket statements that there's no capacity problem when in fact, for most states, there's only one place this can go, and the capacity, depending on how you want to look at the numbers, according to the hearing we had before this committee, said it's between 20 and 30 years. And finally, I'd like to address the issue of that this is an anti-trade bill. It's interesting. I always thought trade was a two-way street. And since no other country in the world takes another country's radioactive waste, I'm not clear how by this country also saying we won't take new radioactive waste, somehow we're anti-trade. I'm a real pro-trade guy. You can check my voting record and see. But I just don't think that argument holds any water. So thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for scheduling this. I encourage my colleagues to vote for this bipartisan legislation and look forward to its passage.